Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. I'm really actually quite excited about today's seminar. I think it's got quite a lot of information that I found really useful as far as just breaking out of the kind of limiting thoughts that kind of go on in the back of my mind that I don't even necessarily register that I'm having, but that really stop me from, not just succeeding, but even trying things sometimes. I think you'll find this really interesting. Now, I've done what I always do, and I've put too much information into this seminar, so I'll probably talk for possibly almost an hour, and then we have a half-hour mixed lecture and seminar from Master Akawa, which is really relevant and really beautiful, and is hopefully really soothing after all of the information that I'm going to load you with. So I'll do all the theory, and then he can soothe it all and run the meditation in the video. Just so you know, I worked from this book, which is the older copy, but this book is our newer version of the Guideposts of Happiness, and almost all of this seminar comes from this book. So if you find some of it interesting, or you want to go into more detail about some of the particular, I guess, mental states that we get ourselves into, then this is the one to have a look at. There you go. So, first of all, some of these sort of common states of, habits of unhappiness that we get ourselves into, a lot of it is based around repeated failures in our life or in, our past lives that have built up this attitude that we're not, an inferiority complex. So that core one, the inferiority complex that is formed from setbacks and failures in the past that we have probably forgotten and probably, long ago justified to ourselves, but they still build up as a kind of expectation of failure. And we carry that expectation of failure into the things that we do. So that inferiority complex, that we're not good enough for other people, and that other people probably know it, that we carry that around and it makes us anxious and unhappy. So that's one of the main points that we're going to cover, and in more detail. The other is self-tormenting mentality that expects failure. So Master Akawa talks about it like people who train in judo are trained to fall. So they tense their bodies as they fall, and he says that we do a similar thing when we expect failure. So we tense for failure, we're expecting failure. So we attempt something, but it's going to hurt when we fail. So we tense ourselves, and just that anxiety that we build up just from the tension is enough to make us unhappy. And the fact that we actually fail following that in a twisted sort of way makes us happy because it satisfies our expectation that we were going to fail. So we get kind of twisted up trying to protect ourselves from failure, whereas we just need to kind of open up and live a little more carefree, a little more cheerfully, expecting that tomorrow will be better regardless of past failures. So they're quite related, but they're also a little, they are very different, and there's a lot of different configurations of these sort of habits of unhappiness that everybody is different, right? So everybody is thinking in different ways and forms different patterns in their thinking, but there's definitely tendencies that we all fall into. And Master Akawa says certainly 90%, probably 100% of people have an inferiority complex. So it's not just, us geeks, it's like actually everybody, even the people who are most successful in this world, often became successful because they're paralyzed with fear that they need to be better and prove themselves to be better. So they work harder. They're motivated by that anxiety, which doesn't actually lead to happiness, regardless of how much success that they have. But we'll get back to that. And we're also going to talk about overcoming a slump in life. which is also quite an interesting topic. So in this book, Muster talks about, in a very simple way, he says, we choose unhappiness. It's like a canvas and we choose what colours we want to use. Do we use bright colours? And every time we have a thought or an emotion, we're putting colour down on our canvas, right? So what colours we use every day kind of dictates the nature of our happiness or unhappiness. And it's definitely a choice that we choose. We consciously or unconsciously choose to put down colours every day. And it's really, we can think about it in that sort of very simple way. So thoughts and our mind, we can really keep it simple and think about what colours are we using. We're using gloomy colours, angry colours, colours that are making us unhappy in our thoughts every day. So what are we thinking every day? Okay. So he sets the stage with that sort of analogy for thinking in the mind. Now, two major reasons why we get these put down negative mental images on our canvas every day are, first of all, disappointments as the result of past failures, and an inferiority complex, which may or may not be related to the first one. So we have dreams, you know, we come into this world excited and full of passion and dreams, and you know, I don't know about you guys, but I've probably had more dreams fail to come to realization than I've had come to full realization. Okay, and it kind of wears us down a little bit, right? So we carry from that. It creates a kind of a really deep in our minds, a sense of loss, that this world is not a happy place, that happiness kind of doesn't come as a result of having dreams and following dreams. And so it kind of, we start to limit ourselves, we start to inhibit our dreams so that we don't feel that sense of loss. Because we're so passionate about our dreams, especially in youth. Carry so much excitement, and we put so much energy into them that when they don't bear fruit the way that we expect, the loss is very acute, right? So that's the first one. The second one is that there's often, the second aspect of that, is that there's a large gap between the way that we see ourselves and the way that we expect others to, or the others actually treat us. Not our expectation, but the way that others actually treat us. And that large gap, you know, like we might think we deserve, you know, more pay, more respect, more recognition, just more. But other people don't seem to notice how much we deserve those things. And the disappointment and the growing gap between those two things, again, causes us a lot of unhappiness. And if you put too much into that, then it will, you know, continue to cause you greater and greater unhappiness. I'll get to solutions soon. At the moment, I'm just kind of laying out the problem. So the inferiority complex, as we said, may be attached to the failures in the past, but it certainly kind of leads to a kind of self-hating mentality where you really don't believe that you deserve happiness or that you're as good as other people or that you're worthy of success. And so, again, it's kind of a self-fulfilling idea that the more that you believe that you're not worthy, you move more and more into a kind of victim mentality, a kind of vulnerable, you don't take action when you need to, and so it becomes true, increasingly becomes true. But it can, in other cases, inspire great success. So many of the people who appear on television and are held as great celebrities, I mean, you see it perhaps most acutely with child stars who have like crippling self-image problems as they grow older, because there's this huge expectation on them. Just because somebody is successful doesn't mean that they don't have stresses about being inadequate to the task, the situation, and to be, looked down on by others. People who are seeking worldly recognition are often desperate for it because of this situation. Part of the solution to this, though, is to have success and to feel real confidence in your ability grow as you have success. So some people can escape this when they feel the confidence growing. But if they just, get a bigger house and then look around for people to recognise them, and they don't feel the confidence growing from within them, they're just looking for confidence to be given to them from the outside. They look around and they say, I've got 2 big cars. Who's going to recognise them? Who's going to give them the respect that they want if they can't find the confidence within them first, right? So it can have a really positive result. This inferiority complex can be the seed of success or the seed of, long-term unhappiness, depending on how we use it. Being able to laugh and think cheerfully about your past failures is part of the solution here as well. So to dissolve their power over you in using humour, and we'll come back to that as well. So this is basically what we're talking about. Past failures or setbacks build that inferiority complex, which creates anxiety in us. Just day after day we feel anxiety that we're not good enough. So we can't get out of bed because we don't feel like we're good enough to do anything, succeed at anything. Can lead to overcompensating, which is basically an attempt to make other people jealous or make other people feel bad so that you feel better. And this is obviously not a good solution. If your solution to feeling bad is to make other people feel worse in an attempt to be comparatively feel better, it's not a good solution that will bring lasting happiness. So of course, this cycle ends in unhappiness. So I hope that chart, I think that is more or less the core that I want to share with you today, so that we can try and recognise our past, the setbacks that we have had in the past, and whether or not we still carry feelings of inadequacy, that we're not good enough, that tomorrow is going to be just as bad as that time was. And so we have that expectation of a negative future. So we want to try and remove that habit of thinking in that negative way. So some of this slide probably has way too much information on it. It's probably 2 chapters out of this book, but nonetheless, there's some interesting ideas here. So first of all, calmly accept reality. So maybe you're not actually very good at that thing that you are striving to be, If I was attached to being a world-class soccer player, I think sooner or later, I think it would be a dream that I would need to let go. So I would need to eventually accept reality, regardless of how great, powerful the passion was and the dream. But it's not always, sometimes it can just be, I actually need to work harder. It can be, I'm not at that stage yet, and people aren't respecting my skill because I haven't reached that stage. But if I make effort, I can attain to that stage. So you recognise your own actual level. So it starts to close that gap between your vision of yourself and other people's treatment of you, because you're finding the reality of your own self. And Master Okawa says that life is like a lifelong struggle to gauge our own sort of value. So we spend much of our life trying to figure out how valuable we actually are. So this is hard. and we'll come back to it again, but calmly is also important. So don't become a tragic hero or heroine. Keep perspective. Don't think that, oh, life is so terrible, and like you become the star of your own tragedy. And it's a very self-centered view. You're really, you think that everybody is referring to you when they say things, so you start to think that everybody is talking negatively about you, and that the whole world is sort of conspiring against you, and you become the center of the story. And it's a very self-absorbed view, and the more tragic the circumstances, the more sort of pitiable we become. And yeah, we actually just want to keep perspective. So be able to look at ourselves from an outside perspective, look at ourselves clearly and think, actually, this problem is really small. Many other people have overcome this problem. It's quite an obvious one, of course, but don't become attached to and complain about small problems. So little problems in our daily life, stuff happens, and we kind of should really expect that. And if we keep it in perspective, if we calmly accept reality, then we can, just step over those small problems. And if we don't reinforce them in our minds, then it's quite, it's much easier, than if we're reinforcing how difficult they are all the time with our words and with our thoughts. So keep the problems as small as possible. Don't blow them out with our thinking and words. Okay, so Master Okawa, again in this book, asks the question, if someone says harsh words to you and you remain upset by those words for 5 years or 10 years by those harsh words, whose fault is that? Who's to blame for all that suffering, 10 years of suffering? I think most people would come to the conclusion that it's us that's responsible for our own suffering. So other people plant the seed, but we nurture the seed. We water it and we keep it growing. We give it good conditions to grow in. So if we don't nurture those seeds of unhappiness, someone cuts me off in traffic, deep breath. It's okay, it wasn't a personal thing. Does that make sense? So take responsibility for our own suffering. As part of that, seeing things with calmly and with a real perspective. Okay, so attack the problem repeatedly is just a persistent attitude. Just because you failed once in the past doesn't mean that you can't succeed today if you try again and again and continue to try. So that inferiority complex makes us very vulnerable to giving up just too soon. So don't give up too quickly if you're trying to achieve something. And be aware that in the same situation, two people might respond very differently to exactly the same situation. So they, I think that's fairly obvious, but try and be the one who, responds positively. It's fairly clear. And the last issue here is to revolutionise our perspective, to find a new solution. So, if you're given an A-B choice, find plan C, find the next plan, find the next option. Try and innovate and find a different solution that you haven't had before. And sometimes just thinking in a concentrated way about the problem is enough to give you an idea that can open up a new solution. And just being open to a new solution, a new way of doing things, can be enough to change that situation. So I'm calling this the Mario method, is to see obstacles and enemies as springboards. So do you know what I'm talking about when I talk about Mario? A little video game character from the 80s or before, bouncing on mushrooms and little snails. Right, almost, yeah. A little bit, right? It's a long time ago now. But every obstacle he has, he can bounce higher and higher and use those obstacles to take him to the next level. So if we go along on a very steady, stable path and we never have any obstacles, we never need to innovate, we never need to think differently, we don't have that opportunity to use them as a springboard to go higher and to find the next opportunity to take it to a new level. So if we think about these obstacles and we go through life looking for obstacles that we can, step off and over in that way, I think it's a much better way of looking at things than to look at obstacles and go, oh, it's just not meant to be, I give up, and to give up at that point. Okay, moving on. Okay, so last week I spent a week down at the temple in Sydney, just cleaning the temple basically and weeding and whatnot. And it reminded, because I was thinking about this seminar, it reminded me of some of the setbacks I've had in jobs in the past. And two jobs in particular that I've had for only half a day when I was, young. One was just like a kitchen hand job. And, after a few hours, the restaurant guy grumpily told me that I just wasn't fast enough and just to go away. And to me, that that's a setback, right? That feels like something that's painful. And maybe I use that as a motivation to be faster. I'd like to think so. But it certainly felt like a setback at the time, and it felt like a failure. And the other was a time that I had a gardening job, and the guy just sent me to work, and I spent quite a bit of time pulling out a particular bulb that he'd planted. It looked like a weed to me. He was not happy, and so he didn't want me to come back. But that idea of failing in work, it's definitely something that the seed of that stays with us into the future. And there's not much pressure weeding in a temple, but it's definitely a chance to contemplate. And I spent a lot of time through the week sort of contemplating my past failures, and it was a very interesting experience, sort of having that time to think back over some of those past setbacks. But I think all of our lives have these times, and it can even just be someone saying, oh, that wasn't very good. When it was actually something that we'd worked hard on. It can be a real setback that we can carry with us. So we can use that as, feedback, and we can grow from it, or we can use it as sort of a crippling burden that we carry for a long time. So to think about how we deal with failures. Okay, this is a little bit off the topic, but I'm going to go through it really quickly, and I think we've kind of touched on it already. But people who appear very vulnerable, Master says it starts from a very young age. Even very little children, you can tell the ones that will be bullied because they have a kind of a vulnerable attitude, and they're kind of on the verge of suffering, and you could just push them and they'll cry, you just touch them and they'll cry. Whereas someone who has a lot of confidence inside them, has a very strong will, they look like, they just have an energy about them that if you push them, they would hit you. they would like, they have too much inner strength for you to just push them around. So people who have this kind of victim mentality have had, quite possibly, in the past lives, they've had really harsh lives, possibly involving like torture or other terrible situations that have made them, expect to be hurt, abused by others. So, I mean, it's a difficult thing, but that excess sensitivity, you need to try and just create that confidence, that strength of will and strength of determination, that if somebody pushes, you can stand up strong and not be pushed around. And the bullies are bullying for a very similar reason. They have that inferiority complex, and as we mentioned before, they're trying to put somebody down in an attempt to feel bigger. So if they can't push you down very easily, they will stop trying, because it won't give them the sensation of feeling bigger than you that they were seeking. I guess I talk about this because I've been, I have a 4-year-old daughter, and the kids are playing, and the boys are always stronger, but the girls, some of the girls, I think my daughter is fairly strong, and most of the time I don't think she's bullied, but I fear that some of the girls are. But you can see the vulnerability in them. You can see that they're almost waiting to be pushed around. And I don't know, I think they just need to be encouraged to just stand up strongly. You don't need to push back. I'm not saying that they need to hit back, but just to, really stand up for themselves rather than just folding up and crying is the better attitude. So build positive confidence, removes the need to reduce others' value. So it's worth examining our childhood for hints of this self-tormenting tendency. So this vulnerability may have been visible in our childhood, and we may have gotten over it for the most part, but there still might be that seed of that tendency deep inside our minds. So it might be easier to see in our childhood than to find in our adult minds. Some people who have great souls, and they can feel within them a lot of power, a lot of strength deep inside, like spiritual power, often find that there's a great gap between their own, as we were talking about before, their own self-image, their own knowledge of themselves, and the way that the world sees them and the way that the world is. So some people have an attitude of not being happy until everybody in the world is happy, or not being happy until everybody in the world is fed, like waiting for world poverty to end before they can be happy. And so, of course, you can't be happy with that kind of attitude. So it's a kind of, it's the kind of suffering that comes from a lot of inner strength, but not enough capacity, like physical capacity, to make it reality in the world. So if you strongly feel the urge to end poverty in the world, good luck, go for it, but you don't want to attach your happiness to that success, or it will be a very difficult life. But many people have this tendency, many spiritual people especially have this tendency of thinking that opposition in the world is a kind of trial sent by God, and the more the opposition, the more the hardship in the world, the better it is for their soul. And I certainly see this tendency in myself a little bit, but it probably comes from monks whipping themselves in past lives. It's that kind of mentality a little bit. But that kind of mentality comes from, perhaps Jesus dying on the cross is kind of like the ultimate example of that. Like a great soul who has too much opposition in the world can't break through all the opposition, and it was a ridiculous world that he was born into. It was a terrible state. And the final result is that he dies trying to break through that barrier. But this isn't a good habit to develop a tendency for as a soul. So you don't want to make a habit of being the martyr or playing the martyr or self-sacrificing, so giving up your happiness for others' happiness. You should create your own happiness as an example for other people. So you should live a great life, a powerful life, a successful life as an example for other people, not a impoverished, unhappy life for some other reason. Okay? So I find that very interesting, and I certainly, as I said, I find all of these tendencies within myself. I probably wouldn't be talking about them if I didn't go, oh, gee, that's interesting. So don't overvalue ordeals and trials is the bottom line there. Okay, so the question here is, do you believe that you have the right to be happy? And take a second to just consider, do you really believe that you deserve to be happy? It seems like an easy question, but so often we, for various reasons, you know, it's that self-hurting mentality where we think that we don't deserve it. We think we haven't done good enough. We've done bad things. We haven't succeeded. We don't deserve it. And that's the reason we're not happy. But the truth is that we can choose happiness, you know, a little bit every day, a little bit brighter colour on that canvas of our mind, and we can paint a brighter future over time. It's guaranteed. So we need to choose happiness. So choose not to voice negativity. Believing that the future happiness is possible and not to be limited by past events. So I've said it several times already, but not to think that just because something happened in the past that it's guaranteed to happen today or tomorrow. Believing, and it's a kind of faith, believing optimistically and cheerfully that tomorrow is going to be better, tomorrow is going to be happier, and trying to always build happiness within us first, and then to realise it in the world. You know, so many people are just waiting for happiness to happen to them, like it's a happening. But it really needs to be something that we create first, through our own decision and through our own will. If somebody is choosing unhappiness, even God can't make them happy. It's their choice. It's like within the realm of human free will to choose unhappiness. So we're allowed to choose unhappiness. So, yeah, so don't choose it. And I know that sounds like an oversimplification, and of course it is, but keeping it that simple gives you a lot of power over it. Just keeping it as simple as saying, oh no, hang on, let's forget about that. I choose happiness, let's start that again. And thinking in that way, over time, it can't help but bring happiness. Okay, and I talked about this last time. You can't wait for everybody else to be happy. You need to be happy yourself. You can't wait for conditions. You can't wait for other people to bring happiness to you. You can't wait for the relationships and the stars to align. You need to choose perfect happiness now. And as a child of God, I believe that you all deserve that. We all deserve that. We all deserve perfect happiness right now. And so don't wait. Yeah. So compared to that original arrow, here's the positive way of dealing with setbacks. So again, it starts with failures and setbacks, but this time they're used as a springboard. They're used to improve your actions and your attitude and to make your soul stronger. So every setback is an opportunity to become stronger. Just like you would working in a gym, you strain muscles to make your muscles stronger. It's exactly the same. We challenge our mind, we challenge our will to make it stronger. So they become a springboard, which creates success, which creates confidence. And just success doesn't automatically lead to confidence, so we need to recognise the successes. And so many people recognise all their failures. They keep a detailed list in their subconscious about all their failures and their shortcomings, and would have terrible difficulty listing a success, when obviously their life is full of successes. Every day somebody has something that they should be proud of and grateful for, that they can really appreciate. But if you don't take that time, then you don't gain confidence from your success. Okay? But once we have that confidence, we can also use it to inspire and comfort others. So other people who are having failures, we can use this experience of failure to success, to confidence, to inspire other people. So we can use examples of our failures, Master says humorously, so if you can talk about your failures humorously, it means that you really are, have conquered them in that way. And it can be used to really benefit others and to spread happiness. And of course, giving happiness is really the key to true happiness. And so of course, this whole cycle leads to true and lasting happiness. Whereas the other one was, just patching a leaking sieve, trying to gain happiness from others. Trying to avoid excuses, because we can always justify why we're unhappy, but we don't learn anything from that. We just kind of make excuses, and we feel kind of insulated from the stress, the anxiety. But instead, if we're confident enough to recognise the failure as a failure, we can say, oh, I failed, but this is why. And understand the causes and say, okay, let's fix that, right? And because we can see it clearly. But if we say, oh, well, this is actually somebody else's fault, and we can't take responsibility because we're not confident enough, then we can't fix that. So avoid excuses. Gratitude just cuts through unhappiness. If you can feel gratitude for other people and gratitude for your life, it makes you appreciate the good parts. And in truth, happiness is kind of relative. It's comparative often. And if you're comparing it in a way that makes you appreciate it, then you just are happier. Grow confidence. Yep. Okay, there's a whole section on this idea of giving love to others and giving blessing to others. So if you see others that are successful, instead of saying, oh, well, they probably cheated and lied to gain that success, to expecting that they are not good in some way, or to undermine their success with your mind, it separates you from that goal which you actually are striving for. So if you're jealous of somebody, it's actually because you want that state. So, you're not jealous, I've said it before, but Usain Bolt, who run 100 metres, no jealousy in me at all to be able to do that. I just can't feel jealous. So much glory to him, gold medals and glory, but it's not something that I would be jealous about. But there is people in the world who I would be jealous looking at, because I actually strive for what they've already attained. So we should look at those people and bless their success. We should look at them and go, that's fantastic that they've gained that success. I can do that too. And thank you to them for showing us the way, leading the way. Rather than sabotaging, trying to undermine their happiness, their success. There's a lot in this one line, but to bless others' happiness is very important. Slumps come to us all. And they come often when we've just overextended ourselves, spent too much energy, haven't been building up our energy at the same time, and we go into a slump. And it can be the precursor to illness, so it can be a sign that we'd really need to, recharge before we get sick. And I'm sure you all know that feeling where, it's your holiday begins and you feel your rest, and then you slump, and then you're sick. You have the time, so suddenly you're sick. Because you just you've overextended yourself. Don't think, oh, it will just pass. Just ignore it. Try to learn from it. Try to figure out what it is that you're doing too much of or not doing enough of, and try and use it as it's your body signalling you. It's definitely like a sign that you should be paying attention to something. So pay attention to it. Don't just kind of brush it aside and figure that it will fix itself, because it could become increasingly worse if we ignore it. One of the interesting things is that to experience a slump, you need to have had past glory. So he says that it's like financial fluctuations. But to avoid like a bust, just having a steady, ordinary life would be the solution to having a bust. But then you don't experience the boom. There's not that creative boom time either. It moves in very similar way to the financial markets in that kind of boom bust. Confidence is so important, so the confidence builds your sense of value. Whereas like a little bit of doubt, when there's a rush on the banks and it's like a crash in your self-confidence and your own sense of personal worth. So different people at different times will have different feelings of self-worth. But I thought this was a very interesting idea to think about. But then overcoming a slump, first of all, to remember that you're a child of God, child of Buddha, and that you have unlimited energy within you if we can tune into it. So one of the ways to do that is to study, but to have times when you're accumulating energy. So if you're in a slump, use that time to accumulate energy. And by this I mean spiritual energy, by studying or meditating or creating good thoughts. Definitely studying is a really good way of creating good habits of thinking. And of course I mean studying Dharma teachings. So this is really the time when, it's a little bit like the poor woman giving a penny, donating a penny. It's that kind of attitude. When you're feeling low, if you can still give to others and think of others and feel like working to help others, you'll improve so much faster. You'll feel so much energy coming. And if you have an attitude of wanting to serve others, help others, you'll always have more energy coming to you. Yeah, the most powerful way to overcome a slump is to work to bring joy to others. This will absolutely help you to break through. Push through and expect tomorrow to be better. If you're experiencing a slump, take the time to create seeds of happiness for the future. So plant seeds, and soon they will, lift you out of your slump. I hope that helps. It's a difficult situation, and I know we definitely all fall into that situation quite often, especially because we're quite passionate people, so we have the booms, we have the exciting times. Yeah. Okay, so that's the end of my talking part. As I said, this is a short lecture and a meditation session with Master Okawa. It's quite relevant. The information that he talks about is very relevant to what I've just covered. But if anybody has any questions before we start this, feel free to ask. No? Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you very much for listening to me and your patience. If you come up with any questions later, or you'd like to brainstorm any personal problems, particular problems. And of course we have Tetsu next week, so.
Let's begin the meditation of light. The intent of this meditation is for you to look at the bright side of matters. As I also wrote in my book, Meditation on Happiness, in general, there is no one in heaven who is gloomy. Not one person in heaven has a dreary disposition. Take this to heart. So if you wish to know whether you would go to heaven or hell, ask yourself if you are a negative person or not. If your answer is yes, then automatically you know your destination. Angels in heaven are not immune to suffering or sorrow. They too can experience them from time to time, but it is from the hardships that they encounter in doing their task. They feel pain or sorrow, but they are not negative. So if you have a strong feeling that your present self or past self might be dark or murky in color, you should realize that you are inclined to go to a dark place. To overcome this disposition, you need to make the effort to shine. You can counter your tendency by making a deliberate effort to shine. This meditation of light is in fact another version of meditation to know contentment. Lessening your desires so that you would be satisfied with your present situation may be one way of knowing contentment. But perhaps your present situation is not as bad as you thought it to be. In fact, you could be standing on high ground. To know contentment, you may say to yourself, stop aiming so high when your abilities are so limited. But you can also say, don't underestimate yourself too much. You are actually on higher ground than you thought. You might think, I am still at the foot of the mountain and have an entire mountain to climb. I have no confidence, no stamina to conquer the summit. However, in the meditation of light, you will find that you are not at the foot of the mountain, but have already climbed up to a very high altitude. You will realize that you are already very blessed and that your life is full of brilliance. If you feel that every day of your year was a rainy day, then you have a gloomy disposition. Certainly, in countries like Japan, the rainy season comes around every year, but when it's over, we all soon forget about it, don't we? But if it feels to you that the rainy season is lasting all year long, then I must say that it is a very pitiful mind inclination. Methods of self-reflection, such as the Noble Eightfold Path, is not complete without a process such as the meditation of light. You cannot say that you have finished your self-reflection unless you see the side that shines with light. Simply gazing at the darkness in yourself and trying to remove it will not fulfill the purpose of self-reflection. Only when you recognize the light that you overlooked can you say that you have self-reflected in the true sense of the word. In this sense, the meditation of light compensates for the weakness of conventional forms of self-reflection. Human beings blindly grope their way through life and get scratched and scarred in many ways. Their mind becomes preoccupied with their scars and wounds, and they lose sight of their noble, shining inner nature. So the important thing is not to gaze too much at your past mistakes or wrongdoings. How you evaluate your wounds is very crucial in keeping a positive mindset. Those who have a strong sense of unhappiness focus on their wounds a lot. They see it to be bigger than it really is. Their wound could be nothing but a mere scratch that would heal spontaneously if left alone. The interpretation here is that darkness is merely the absence of light. Perhaps you may feel you are worthless when you look back at your past. Nevertheless, you surely have some brilliance in you. You must sufficiently search and discover this shining part. Otherwise, you will end up blaming your environment or other people. This tendency does inevitably appear, so you must be able to overcome it by yourself without troubling others. What you can solve, you have to solve for yourself. The main goal of the meditation of light is to overcome your inferiority complex. This is the cause of a lot of your suffering. Over 90% of people, or perhaps even everyone, suffer immensely from feelings of inferiority. Their insecurities bleed afresh when the wound is opened. What can heal it is neither drug nor bandage, but spiritual practice to recognize your inner light. This practice is what heals your mental wounds. Now let's practice the meditation of light. Please put your mind at ease. You don't have to feel so grave about today's practice. We will do this in 3 parts, each for 5 minutes. Then please sit tall with your back straight. Close your eyes gently and harmonize your breathing. The first meditation of light will focus on the period since the time of your birth until the age of about 12, when you finished elementary school. This period can also be further subdivided into 2 parts. The first is the time before you started school, maybe at around the age of 6, and the second is the time during your school days from 1st to 6th grade. Now recall an image of yourself when you shone most brilliantly during this time. Remember the image of the moment you were wonderful, even in your eyes today, an image that perhaps you have forgotten now. Please start the meditation. Now we will move on to the next phase.
2番目に入ります。
The practice is the same.
いきます。
This time, we will work on the period between when you were aged 12 to 18. The first half is when you were in middle school or junior high. The second is when you were in high school.
学生時代、
During these times at school,
学校で、
in these times of learning,
この頃にすでに皆さん
you must have experienced the blossoming of your soul.
こんなものがあったはずです。この
During your middle and high school age,
実は自分の一
the
番
best part of yourself
もうすでに出て
must have appeared already.
一番光っている面
Your most brilliant qualities were already shining
で
through.
はこの前半後半に
Now let's look back at the days when you were 12 to 18 years old.
の自分というものを振り返ってみてください。その中で
Discover the splendid,
素晴らしい
shining self from that
経
period.
験してみてください。
Now we move onward to the third phase. This is now dealing with your life after age 18. Some of you may have started working in society, while others continued on to higher learning. Self-examination now is about yourself after you joined as a member of society. Some of you may have gotten married and started a family. Others may have taken up a job and started their professional life. Please discover yourself shining brightly during this time, a moment when you were radiating light and sincerely proud of your innate talent lighting up the world. Remember this genuine figure of yourself. Search for and gaze for a while at the most shining image of yourself after 18 years of age till now. Now please finish your meditation.
迷惑でございます。
Please open your eyes and return to a relaxed position. I see many people crying, despite this being a meditation on gazing at the light within ourselves.
まあ別に笑ってるわ
I am not laughing at you. It is all right to cry and shed
な
tears.
ぜ涙が
Do
出る
you know why you are shedding tears?
それは
It is
素
because
晴らしい自分と
this meditation reminds us of the splendid self that we had long forgotten
ということ
or
を知るわ
overlooked.
けですね。で
This meditation of light is based on positive
瞑
thinking
想
and may look the very opposite of the idea of self-reflection, but it actually brings about a similar effect as that of self-reflection. When you discover the shining self in you, you would feel that something must be wrong with your present state of mind
現在の自分の心境を考えてみて
and wonder
ああしまったな
how you have lost that beautiful self.
どこにやってしまったかなとこう思われるんですね。
Then automatically you start having the same effect as that you would have after self-reflection.
そんなもんなんですね。
The meditation of light and the meditation on happiness might seem the same to you. I would say that the difference between these two is that the meditation of light focuses more on the brilliance of your soul, or in other words, on your Buddha nature, or divine nature. You look at the beauty of your soul and at the splendid side of yourself. It means that this meditation makes you know and believe in the true nature of yourself as a child of God. The meditation on happiness focuses more on the various events and incidents in your life to see that you have actually been blessed with the fruits of happiness on countless occasions. This is the difference of these two meditations.